for me, the most important thing about law is it provides us with a way to regularly manage a society that inevitably, as every society does, has both a lot of conflicts and a lot of collective behavior. It's a way of organizing, routinizing, and standardizing collective behavior so that's most effective. It's a way of resolving disputes that preserve civil peace. My own research usually takes a very long historical perspective. And one of the things that you see when you look back over the course of Western history is the crucial role that the maintenance of civil order plays in society, and the crucial role that law plays in that process of maintaining civil order. So in the early Middle Ages, let's say in the 10th century, you had a very chaotic situation where every small principality, every castle, every county was essentially an armed camp that could not rely on the peaceful relationships with the other small principalities, but in fact were constantly at war with them. And it was an extremely unpleasant situation for the people who were alive then. So in the 10th century, you get the Peace of God movement, where artisans, peasants, and clerics literally rioted in objection to the warlike policies of the armed nobility and demanded that the nobility stop fighting and that the royal regimes establish a system of civil peace. And this is one of the things that this has several major effects. The first thing was the Crusades. So the church undertook to redirect the aggressiveness of the military aristocracy away from fighting with each other and toward fighting outside Europe and going to the Holy Land. The second thing that the Peace of God movement did was establish a second day when you weren't allowed to fight. You were never allowed to fight on Sunday. That isn't to say they didn't, but they weren't supposed to. A second day, originally Thursday, and subsequently Saturday, when you weren't allowed to fight. And that's the origin of the weekend. We owe the concept of the weekend to the Peace of God movement. And thirdly, it was the Peace of God movement that I think triggered the 11th and 12th century development of law and legal rules as a way of resolving disputes against people, among people, so that they wouldn't engage in this kind of endless internecine warfare that created a problem of civil peace. We have a second period of chaos that resulted from the Reformation. And at that time, of course, there was already well-established regimes that could impose civil order internally, but these regimes came into conflict with each other over their religious controversy, and for about 150 years, Europe was racked by civil war. And there were areas of Europe that were devastated, some that still haven't recovered, really, from the chaos and conflict of the Reformation. And it's really to that experience that we owe modern doctrines of religious toleration, our own First Amendment separation of church and state, because the founders of our constitutional system were very much aware of that history of conflict and very anxious to avoid it by, again, removing religion from the arena of politics and saying that that should be private and that the state should be neutral with respect to religion. So we get our constitutional law from that experience of conflict, as we get our civil law from the experience of conflict that occurred during the European Dark Ages. So for me, what's crucial about law, it's a way to create an ordered society. It's a way to resolve conflicts. It's a way to manage the inevitable multiplicity of views without violence, without the tremendous inefficiencies and kinds of dislocations that conflicts produce. To give you one minor example, there were no hotels in the 10th century. You couldn't have a hotel because a hotel sitting along the roadside would be immediately subject to the deprivation of all these brigands and all these armed nobility and all these other people who would prey on travelers who could only proceed in essentially armed convoys. And you only get inns and hotels moving forward, let's say the 12th, 13th, 14th century, once you have civil order, once the royal regime can essentially impose peace on the roadways and on the process of traveling. So even so something so simple and we take for granted as a hotel can only exist if you have civil order. And it's civil order that gives ordinary people, not the hyper-aggressive nobility, but the ordinary people who have to live ordinary lives, a way to have a decent life and ultimately a self-fulfilling life. Well, I've been delighted to be dean at Vanderbilt for the last 4.5 years. I came here with an agenda that I presented to the faculty. You're not supposed to do that if you want to be a dean. You're supposed to tell the faculty, well, I'll do what you want and I'll serve your needs and I'll try to get as much money for you as possible. But I came with an agenda, and it was to the credit of Vanderbilt that they were willing to sign on to something like that. I feel like almost everything that I outlined at the outset we've achieved and we've implemented. So we have a revised first-year program, we have upper-class concentrations, we have a lot of the innovations that I was urging the faculty to adopt, and I feel it's time for me now to go back to being a scholar and a teacher, which is why I went into the academy at the outset. And the future changes in Vanderbilt should be thought through by someone else. So I'm going to be remaining on the faculty. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm really looking forward to going back and thinking from an academic perspective about some of these ideas as well as other ideas about modern government and the nature of administration in a modern state. So speaking now as an academic, one of the reasons that I wanted to return to academics is to think through a specific set of issues. And that's the following, and it's really parallel to what I've been talking about in terms of legal education. The way we think about law is still conditioned by the pre-modern era and by the pre-modern state. We still have a set of categories for the way we describe law that originated in the Middle Ages, and these involve basic terms such as rights, such as property, and such as law itself. It's not clear, going forward into the administrative era, that those categories remain applicable. And one of the challenges for us as a civilization is to really rethink this wonderful legal system we have so that it fulfills those functions of dispute resolution, of coordination, of the maintenance of civil order, as we go forward into a new era that is going to continue to be dominated by statutes and by regulation. And one of the things that I'm looking forward to thinking through are all the implications of that for our way of thinking about law, for our way of thinking about the way we relate to each other. The advent of the administrative state is one of the most important developments in the history of the world. It changes the way we govern ourselves, it changes the way we think about ourselves. And I think it's extremely important to grapple with the implication of those changes in terms of our legal system and think creatively about ways that the legal system should change in response to it.